Cotton, please.
I agree with what Senator Blumenthal said, that the administration has been deterring itself from providing the Ukrainians the weapons they need. I'd say from the very beginning, they've engaged in half measures while Ukraine has half succeeded, and they should quit pussyfooting around on the battlefield. I want to look before Russians launched this war, though, Mr. Zakheim, to what happened in 2021. Winston Churchill, in his famous Iron Curtain speech, cautioned against offering temptations to a trial of strength. And he offered that caution specifically about the Russians, who he had said he had just seen up close and personal as allies and friends for many years. And there's nothing they respect so much as military strength, and nothing for which they have less respect than military weakness. Can you tell us, how did the botched withdrawal in Afghanistan perhaps tempt Vladimir Putin to a trial of strength in Ukraine?
Well, I think they correlate, Senator. I agree with your, the thrust of your question. The United States looked weak. Didn't look like it was did not support and stay until every U.S. service member went home, and it looked like we were unable to carry out military operations, and so we looked defeated. And I think when you look weak, people like Vladimir Putin seek to exploit the opportunity.
When Joe Biden took office, I think it'd be fair to say that Vladimir Putin's top two foreign policy priorities, at least as it related to the United States, were one, the extension of the New START treaty, which is a badly one-sided nuclear arms control treaty that the Obama administration entered, and two, the waiver of sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. In his very first week in office, Joe Biden extended the New START treaty. Shortly after that, he waived sanctions on Nord Stream 2 pipeline. How did Joe Biden's decision to give Vladimir Putin his top two foreign policy priorities without any concessions whatsoever perhaps tempt Vladimir Putin into a trial of strength in Ukraine?
Well, it made clear to everybody, including, I think, President Biden, that engagement with Vladimir Putin, that seeking to put forward a carrot in order to prevent the type of behavior that we've seen consistently from Vladimir Putin, as we mentioned before, from 2008 in Georgia, 2014 in Crimea, is not going to work. That, as you pointed out at the beginning of your question here, Senator Cotton, President Putin responds to one thing: force in kind and strength. And I think that is what the Ukrainians have shown, and this Congress has supported and actually pushed the President to be more forceful in that support and to understand the urgency that's required there.
Let's look at the provision of weapons to Ukraine. Actually, let's go back to the Obama-Biden era, since in President Obama's era, we provided meals ready to eat and blankets, not ammunition and javelins. And then since then, it's been a constant story of ammunition but not artillery, artillery but not HIMARS, HIMARS but not armor, infantry fighting vehicles but not tanks. Okay, tanks but not fighters or ATACMs or cluster munitions or so forth. I have to assume, given this pattern, we're going to see provision of some of those weapons and platforms sometimes in the future when they're less effective than they would have been if they had been provided months ago or at the beginning of this war. But let's look at one in particular. Since a lot of these things we're talking about, Bradley fighting vehicles, especially Abrams tanks, F-16s, do have long logistic tails that take some training. We've heard a lot today about Russians being dug in trench lines, almost World War I style warfare. We have more than 1 million cluster munitions in our stockpiles here in the United States. To date, we are not providing them in anything like sizable numbers. Could you explain what cluster munitions could do to help the Ukrainians perhaps break through the stalemate in eastern Ukraine?
Well, Senator, as you point out, they disperse, they clear the field, and they're very effective in having a strategic impact when you're dealing with the tactical problem that you've outlined.
And why would we not provide cluster munitions, which would be ready to fire in a matter of days, unlike, say, an Abrams tank or an F-16?
Well, I think anything that we have in our inventory that would be useful for this battle, we ought to offer to the Ukrainians.
Okay. One final question for you, Mr. Zakheim. This is in your role at the Ronald Reagan Institute. Y'all do an annual poll about the American people's respect and admiration for our military. It's shown alarming downward trends in recent years. Can you give us some thoughts, both from the poll and from your experience in crafting these questions and following them over the years, about why that is the case?
Senator, thank you for that. We do the Reagan National Defense Survey annually, and just 4 years ago, the American people's trust and confidence in the military was over 70%. And as you referenced there, Senator, now it's actually below 50%. In the most recent defense survey, we asked the respondents why, and the response was clear that the American people believe that the military has become politicized. That's expressed in a variety of different ways, from civilian leadership politicizing the military, to military leadership politicizing the military, to concerns about wokeism and extremism, and it divides up differently across percentage lines. But I think it is not a concern on the American people that the U.S. military is unable to carry out their core mission of protecting this country and being the best military force in the world. It's a concern about politicization penetrating their mission, Senator.
Thank you.